The sterile hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a pallid glow over the emergency ward of St. Mary's Hospital. Rain lashed against the tall windows, blurring the neon signs of the city beyond into streaks of red and blue. It was just past midnight in Chicago's underbelly, where the Loop's skyscrapers loomed like silent judges over the chaos of the streets below. Inside, the air carried the sharp tang of antiseptic mixed with the faint metallic scent of blood. Reminders that life here teetered on a knife's edge, just like everything else in Matteo Rossi's world. Matteo Rossi, at 28, was already a name whispered in fear among the docks and warehouses that lined the Chicago River. Heir to the Rossi syndicate. He'd taken the reins after his father's abrupt retirement 2 years prior. A retirement that involved a quiet disappearance and a power vacuum filled by Matteo's ruthless precision. He wasn't the old-school brute his father had been. Matteo operated like a shadow, his empire built on encrypted ledgers, offshore accounts, and a network of informants who moved like ghosts through the city's veins. But tonight, none of that mattered. A sharp pain had exploded in his side during a routine meet at a Southside warehouse, a stray bullet from a rival crew's ambush grazing him just enough to demand stitches. He hated hospitals. Too many eyes, too many records. But his second-in-command, Luca, had insisted, driving him here under the cover of a nondescript black SUV with tinted windows. As Matteo leaned against the cool tile wall of the waiting area, his dark wool coat draped over his arm to hide the bloodstain, he scanned the room with the instincts of a man who'd survived 3 assassination attempts before breakfast. Nurses bustled past in scrubs the color of faded sky, their footsteps echoing softly on the linoleum. A vending machine hummed in the corner, its glow illuminating a cluster of exhausted families. Luca stood a few paces away, murmuring into his burner phone, coordinating a discreet exit once the doctor cleared him. "Keep it low," Matteo had growled earlier. "No names, no insurance, cash only, and vanish before dawn." The double doors to the triage area swung open, and a young woman emerged, her ponytail swinging like a pendulum as she consulted a clipboard. She couldn't have been more than 25, with sharp green eyes that cut through the dim light and a presence that commanded the space without trying. Her scrubs were crisp, but a faint smudge of what looked like ink or blood marred the sleeve. She moved with purpose, sidestepping a gurney being wheeled by an orderly, her gaze flicking over the waiting patients like she was cataloging threats. Matteo's attention snagged on her, not just because she was the first face in hours that didn't reek of exhaustion, but because something in her posture screamed control in a place built on surrender. "Mr. Rossi?" Her voice was steady, laced with a Midwestern lilt that softened the edges. She glanced at the alias he'd given, John Smith, then back at him, her expression unreadable. "The doctor's ready for you. Follow me." Matteo pushed off the wall, ignoring the twinge in his side, and fell into step behind her. The hallway stretched like a vein through the hospital's heart, lined with beeping monitors and half-open doors revealing glimpses of pale faces and IV stands. The air grew cooler here, carrying the low murmur of ventilators and the occasional cough that rattled like loose change. She led him into a small exam room, its walls painted an institutional beige, the exam table covered in crinkling paper. As she pulled the curtain closed, Matteo caught a whiff of her shampoo, something clean, like fresh linen amid the chaos. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the table while snapping on gloves with practiced efficiency. "Bullet wound? Or did you fall into some construction?" Her tone was light, but her eyes held his a beat too long, assessing. Matteo smirked faintly, easing onto the table. "Construction. Slippery rebar." She didn't laugh, just nodded and began cutting away the bandage Luca had slapped on earlier. Her hands were steady, professional, but as she worked, Matteo's gaze drifted to the ID badge clipped to her pocket. Elena Vasquez, RN. The name tugged at something. A vague whisper from one of his lieutenants about a Vasquez family tied to the old Irish cruise across town. Rivals or ghosts? He filed it away. The door creaked open, and the attending physician bustled in, a harried man in his 50s with wire-rimmed glasses. "Let's see the damage, Mr. Smith." As he probed the wound, Elena stepped back, jotting notes on a chart she'd pulled from the wall rack. But in the shuffle, the folder slipped slightly, its pages fanning open on the counter beside Matteo. He didn't mean to look. Curiosity was a vice he'd trained out of himself, but the top sheet caught his eye. A grainy photo, time-stamped from earlier that evening, attached to a patient's intake form. The face in the photo was hers, Elena's, but younger, maybe 18. Her features softer, unscarred by whatever lines now framed her eyes. Below it, in bold type, Vasquez, Elena Marie. Then the diagnosis: Stage 4 lymphoma, relapsed. Prognosis: 6 months to a year with aggressive treatment. Treatment history scrolled down: chemo cycles, radiation, a bone marrow transplant that failed. Notes from social services: no family listed, financial aid denied, uninsured sporadic employment. A side margin scribbled in pen: patient refuses experimental trial, cites personal reasons. Matteo's breath caught, a rare crack in his armor. He'd seen death ledgers before, names crossed out in his father's study, rivals vanishing into the river. But this was different, personal, raw. Elena Vasquez, the unflinching nurse patching his wound, was staring down her own end, and the chart laid it bare like an exposed wire. Why hadn't she mentioned it? Why carry on like the world wasn't crumbling under her feet? And why did it hit him like a gut punch, the stranger's secret spilling into his night? The doctor finished stitching, rattling off care instructions, but Matteo barely heard. Elena retrieved the chart, her fingers brushing the page as she closed it, oblivious to his stolen glimpse. "Keep it dry. Change the dressing daily," she said, meeting his eyes again. "You'll be fine." As she turned to leave, Matteo's voice stopped her. "Vasquez, you related to Tommy Vasquez? The guy who ran the West Side back in '15? Her shoulders tensed, just a fraction, but enough to confirm the connection. She didn't turn fully, her hand on the door. "Old history. Why?" Before he could press, Luca appeared in the doorway, his face tight. "We need to move, boss." "Words out. There's a tail on the car." Elena's gaze flicked between them, sharpening. Matteo stood, the room suddenly too small, the rain outside pounding harder. What secrets was she hiding? And why did reading her truth make his own world feel like it was fracturing? As they slipped into the night, he couldn't shake the question. Was she a threat? Or something far more dangerous? A mirror to the losses he'd buried deep. The rain-slicked streets of Chicago gleamed under the sodium lamps as Matteo's SUV cut through the night, tires hissing against the wet asphalt. Luca gripped the wheel, his knuckles white, eyes darting to the rearview mirror every few seconds. The hospital faded behind them like a bad dream. But the weight of what Matteo had seen on Elena's chart clung heavier than the storm clouds overhead. Stage 4, relapsed, no family. The words looped in his mind, sharper than the graze of the bullet still throbbing under fresh stitches. He'd built his life on reading people, tells in a poker face, hesitations in a deal. But this was a fracture line he hadn't anticipated. 2 cars back. Black sedan, Luca muttered, accelerating through a yellow light at Halstead. Same plates as the one circling the warehouse earlier. Colucci's crew, probably sniffing for weakness after the ambush. Matteo nodded, his hand instinctively pressing against his side. The interior of the SUV smelled of leather and damp wool, the heater blasting warm air that did little to chase the chill settling in his bones. He pulled out his burner phone, thumbing through encrypted texts from his network. No direct hits yet, but a ping from an informant at the docks. Unusual activity around a shipping manifest for the Colucci family. Crates logged as machinery parts, but flagged for weight discrepancies. Smuggling, likely arms or worse, timed to coincide with their meet. But that didn't explain the hospital tale. Was it coincidence, or had his alias cracked? His thoughts drifted back to Elena. That tense pause when he'd mentioned Tommy Vasquez, her uncle, if the whispers were right, gunned down in a turf war that had nearly toppled the Rossies a decade ago. Tommy's crew had been small-time, running protection rackets on the west side, but their grudge lingered like smoke from a backfired hit. Elena carrying on in scrubs, patching up strangers while her own clock ticked down. It stirred something in Mateo he hadn't felt since his father's retirement. A code he'd inherited: protect the innocent, even if it cost you. But was she innocent? Or a plant? Her vulnerability a lure? The SUV swerved into an alley off Division Street, the engine's low growl echoing off brick walls tagged with faded gang signs. Luca killed the lights, letting the wipers slap rhythmically against the downpour. We lose them here, circle back to the safe house on Superior. You good, boss? Yeah. Mateo's voice was clipped. He wasn't. The revelation gnawed at him, a loose thread in his tightly woven world. Why refuse the trial? Pride? Fear? Or something tied to that Vasquez blood, pulling her into shadows she couldn't escape? He needed answers, but pressing her now risked exposure. Hospitals had cameras, records, too many ways for rivals to connect dots. A distant siren wailed, cutting through the rain's patter, and Luca eased forward, merging onto the shadowed underpass of Wacker Drive. The river churned below, black and restless, its banks lined with looming warehouses that Mateo's operations had claimed years ago. As they emerged topside, the tail reappeared, headlights flickering in the mirror like predator eyes. "Shit," Luca hissed. "They're persistent. Shake it. Head to the pier. Call in Gino's team for backup." Mateo leaned forward, scanning the dashboard's hidden compartment for his spare piece. No firing tonight. Too messy. Too public. But the pressure built, a familiar tension coiling in his gut. This wasn't just about the ambush anymore. Elena's chart had shattered something in him, a reminder that power meant nothing against the slow bleed of time. His father had lost Mateo's mother to cancer, buried the grief under layers of violence. Mateo had vowed never to let loss dictate his moves, yet here he was, rattled by a nurse's secrets. The chase intensified as they hit the lakefront, the SUV's tires skidding on a puddle that sent spray arcing like gunfire. Luca radioed ahead. "Gino, we got company. Colucci tags. Plate ends in 47. Intercept at the Navy Pier lot." Static crackled back. Affirmative. Mateo's mind raced ahead. If Elena was connected, she could be leverage, or bait. He pulled up a secure app on his phone, hacking into the hospital's public patient portal with a ghost account. Basic info only, but there. Elena Vasquez, employed 3 years, no priors. A deeper dive risked flags, but one anomaly popped. A recent transfer request to oncology, denied for staffing shortages. Subtle, but it screamed internal pressure. Was someone at St. Mary's watching her too? They ditched the SUV in the pier's shadowed employee lot, the wind off Lake Michigan whipping cold and briny, carrying the distant clank of moored freighters. Gino's crew arrived in 2 unmarked vans, engines idling like impatient beasts. Mateo slipped into the lead vehicle, Luca sliding in beside him. "Split the tail," Mateo ordered. "One team follows, documents plates. The rest, secure the perimeter." As they peeled out toward the Gold Coast safe house, a penthouse overlooking the magnificent mile, fortified with keycard access and rotating guards, the adrenaline ebbed, leaving room for doubt. Elena's green eyes haunted him, steady despite the storm she faced. He'd seen fighters before, lieutenants who took bullets for the family, but her quiet defiance felt different. Personal. What if reaching out pulled her into his orbit, endangering her more? His code demanded protection, but autonomy was her armor. Cracking it could shatter them both. The penthouse elevator hummed upward, its mirrored walls reflecting Mateo's tense jawline. Luca punched in the override code, the doors sliding open to a foyer of polished marble and low-lit sconces. The air inside was warmer, scented with aged oak from the bar cart, but the floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city as a grid of watchful lights. Mateo poured a finger of scotch, the glass cool against his palm, and sank into a leather armchair. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Left something at the hospital? Check your coat pocket." Heart pounding, he fished into his wool coat, pulling out a folded note slipped there during the exam. Elena's handwriting, neat and unyielding. Tommy was family. Stay away from old ghosts, and get that wound checked. Really. No signature, just a phone number scrawled at the bottom. Luca glanced over, brow furrowing. "Boss?" Mateo stared at the paper, the scotch burning forgotten on his tongue. Was this a warning or an invitation? And if he called, would he be saving her, or damning them both to the river's pull? The penthouse lights dimmed to a soft amber as Mateo paced the Persian rug, the note from Elena crumpled in his fist. The city sprawled below like a glittering web, Lake Michigan's waves crashing faintly against the breakwater, their rhythm syncing with the pulse in his stitched side. Scotch glass in hand, he swirled the amber liquid, its peaty scent cutting through the faint ozone from the storm still lingering outside. Luca had retreated to the security room down the hall, monitoring feeds from hidden cameras along the pier. Gino's team had ID'd the tail as a Colucci runner, plates traced to a chop shop on the south side. But that was logistics, clean and containable. Elena's words burned hotter. Stay away from old ghosts. Tommy Vasquez's shadow, her illness, the way her eyes had held his without flinching. It all tangled like a poorly knotted mooring line, pulling him toward depths he avoided. He shouldn't call. His code was clear. No entanglements with civilians, especially not ones laced with rival blood. But the chart's stark prognosis echoed his mother's final days. Hospital beds, hollow cheeks, the syndicate's money thrown at treatments that bought time but not victory. Mateo had been 18 then, watching his father harden into steel, vowing to shield the family from such fractures. Elena, at 25, carried that weight alone. No family, uninsured, refusing trials. It shattered him because it mirrored the voids he filled with power plays and encrypted deals. He thumbed the number into his burner, hesitating as the line rang once, twice. The penthouse clock ticked like a countdown. "Mr. Smith?" Elena's voice came through, low and guarded, laced with the same Midwestern edge that had steadied her hands on his wound. Background noise filtered in. Beeps of monitors, muffled voices, the whoosh of a closing door. She was still at the hospital, pulling a graveyard shift. "It's Rossi, Mateo." He kept his tone even, leaning against the window where cool glass met his forehead. "You left a note." Bold move, slipping it in a patient's coat. A pause, then the rustle of fabric, like she was shifting in a break-room chair. "You left first, and you asked about Tommy. That's not small talk." He exhaled, the city's hum vibrating through the pain. "Heard the name in passing, West Side history. Figured if you're carrying it might mean something. Partial truth." He'd run a quick check through his network after the exam, confirming Tommy as her uncle, killed in a crossfire that the Rossis had indirectly sparked. No direct ties to her now, but grudges didn't dissolve in rain. "Tommy was blood, not business," she said, sharper now. "Died protecting what was his. You Rossis. You take, you don't ask. What's your angle, really? Pity from the chart?" The accusation landed like a slap, but he caught the undercurrent, defiance masking fear. Not of him, but of whatever clock she was racing. "Saw enough to know you're fighting alone. That's not pity. It's respect. And maybe a debt. I don't like owing anyone, especially not a nurse who patches me up while staring down her own war." Silence stretched, broken only by her steady breath. Outside, a barge horn lowed from the river, distant and mournful. Debt. You think stitches buy loyalty? I've got my own fights, Mateo. Hospitals got eyes too. Cameras in the halls, admins who sell data to the highest bidder. You show up bleeding. I do my job. End of story. But it wasn't. His phone buzzed. An alert from Luca. Anomaly on the penthouse feed. A delivery van lingering too long at the service entrance below. Colucci probing, testing defenses. Mateo's grip tightened. Listen, that tale from the hospital? It's not random. Your shift ends soon. Let me send a car. Neutral ground, coffee at that diner on Clark. No strings, just talk. She laughed, short and bitter, the sound echoing like coins in an empty tray. A Rossi escort, flattering, but I walk my own streets. And if you're smart, you'll forget what you read. Some ghosts stay buried for a reason. The line clicked dead, leaving Mateo staring at the blank screen. Buried ghosts. Tommy's death had been ruled a robbery gone wrong, but his intel painted it as a setup. Irish remnants hitting back at Rossi expansion. Elena's refusal of treatment, the denied transfer. Was it financial, or fear of drawing attention? He pocketed the phone and strode to the security room, where Luca hunched over monitors, the air thick with the hum of cooling fans and stale coffee. Update? Mateo asked, eyes on the split screens. Thermal cams showing the van's driver idling, heat signatures of 2 figures inside. Plates fake, but VIN traces to a shell company tied to Colucci's laundering ops. They're watching, not moving in, yet. Gino's team is en route to Flusham. Luca glanced up, noting Mateo's tension. The call? She's connected. Vasquez blood, deep. But she's clean. Too clean. Refusing help, working double shifts. Smells like she's hiding from more than just the disease. Luca nodded, tapping a keyboard to zoom on a warehouse feed across town. Speaking of, got a hit on that shipping manifest. Colucci's crates? Not machinery. Medical supplies, black market chemo drugs, high-end experimental stuff rerouted from a pharma bust in Milwaukee. Values in the millions, if they're moving it through our docks. Mateo's mind clicked. Elena's chart. Refused experimental trial. Colucci peddling cures on the dark web, preying on the desperate. Was she a target? Or worse, involved, using her access to siphon info? No, that didn't fit her eyes, steady and unbroken. But the pieces aligned too neatly, a ledger of coincidences that screamed orchestration. Pull records on St. Mary's Oncology Wing, he ordered. Staff rotations, recent discharges. And get a tail on her, discreet, no contact. If Colucci's in pharma, they might be leaning on hospital insiders. Luca's fingers flew, screens flickering with data streams. Minutes later, a file popped. Elena's transfer denial linked to budget cuts, but a flagged note, anonymous tip to admin about irregular patient consultations. Behavioral tell, her charting patterns shifted post-diagnosis, avoiding high-risk cases. Protective or evasive? The service entrance cam caught movement, the van peeling away as Gino's unmarked sedan blocked its path, lights off, but purposeful. No shots, just a stare down that ended with tires screeching into the night. Mateo watched, jaw set. Elena's world was colliding with his, her secrets a crack in the syndicate's armor. Calling her had been a risk, but ignoring the pull felt like betrayal. Of his code, of the man who'd lost everything to unchecked shadows. Dawn crept over the lake, painting the penthouse in grays, as Mateo's phone lit with a new text, from an untraceable source. She's not alone tonight. Warehouse on the river. Come if you owe that debt. No sender, but the coordinates matched a Colucci drop point. Trap. Or Elena's coded plea. As he grabbed his coat, the question burned. Was he walking into salvation, or the grave of another ghost he couldn't bury? If you're enjoying this story so far, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. The first light of dawn sliced through the penthouse blinds like a blade, casting long shadows across the marble floors as Matteo shrugged into his coat. The air hung heavy with the scent of cooling coffee and the faint metallic tang from Luca's equipment racks. His burner phone burned in his pocket, the anonymous text a siren call. "She's not alone tonight. Warehouse on the river. Come if you owe that debt." Coordinates pinned it to a derelict stretch along the Chicago River's industrial bend, where rusted silos loomed like forgotten sentinels, and the water lapped at concrete pilings with a sluggish, oily rhythm. Trap or truth? In his world, the line blurred, but Elena's note, her steady handwriting, echoed the pull. He couldn't leave it unanswered, not with Colucci's shadow lengthening over black market meds that mirrored her refused trial. "Luca, you're with me," Matteo said, voice low as he checked the clip in his concealed Glock, the metal cool and reassuring against his palm. No plan beyond recon. Observe, extract if needed, vanish before the sun fully rose. Luca nodded, grabbing keys to a low-profile sedan from the garage, its engine purring to life with a subdued growl that blended into the waking city. They slipped out a side exit, the penthouse's security system beeping a soft acknowledgement behind them. The drive east wound through emptying streets, past shuttered delis and flickering street lamps, the wipers occasionally swiping at lingering mist. Matteo's mind raced. Elena's chart had listed no emergencies, but hospital shifts ended at 7 a.m. She could be off-site, cornered by whoever peddled those pharma crates. Or this was Colucci bait, dangling her vulnerability to draw him out. The riverfront emerged as a gray haze, the air thickening with the briny rot of stagnant water and diesel fumes from idling trucks. Warehouse 17 squatted at the end of a cracked access road, its corrugated walls scarred by years of neglect, windows boarded with plywood that creaked in the wind. Chain-link fencing ringed the perimeter, topped with barbed wire that glinted dully in the half-light. Luca killed the engine a block away, behind a stack of shipping containers that smelled of salt and rust. 2 entrances, main roll-up door, side personnel. Thermal scan shows 3 heat signatures inside, 2 clustered near the back, 1 pacing the front. He handed Matteo a pair of binoculars, the lenses fogging slightly from their breath. Matteo peered through, the warehouse resolving into stark outlines. Forklifts shrouded in tarps. Pallets of unmarked crates stacked like dominoes waiting to fall. The pacing figure was slight, ponytail visible even from here. Elena. Her scrubs had been swapped for jeans and a dark hoodie, arms crossed against the chill as she argued with a burly man in a leather jacket, his gestures sharp, emphatic. The other 2 lurked in shadows, one fiddling with a tablet, the glow illuminating a face Matteo recognized from surveillance photos. Victor Colucci, the underboss, mid-40s with a scar twisting his lip into a perpetual sneer. Heart rate spiking, Matteo lowered the binoculars. "She's in deep. That's Victor. Colucci's enforcer. Whatever this is, it's not a social call." Luca's jaw tightened, his hand hovering near the radio. "Call Gino's team? We go in blind. It's a meat grinder." "No time." Matteo's code surged. Protect the innocent, even if it meant wading into the fray. Elena's defiance on the phone, her refusal of help, painted her as a lone operator, but against Colucci's machine. Suicide. They moved low, skirting the fence line where puddles splashed underfoot, the river's murmur masking their steps. A loose panel in the chain link yielded to a quick cut with bolt cutters from the trunk, the snip echoing like a warning shot. Inside the perimeter, the ground turned to gravel that crunched softly, forcing them to hug the wall. Matteo caught snippets of dialogue through a cracked side door, the voices tinny against the hum of a distant generator. "You think we won't trace the tip? Vasquez's blood runs thin, but it spills easy," Victor growled, his Chicago accent thick as river mud. Elena's response was steel. I tipped you off about the Rossi shipment to settle a debt. Tommy's ledger closed. Now you want me to sabotage their docks? For what? More of your poison pills? I patch people up, not peddle death. Mateo's blood ran cold. Tommy's ledger, old scores, protection money Tommy had funneled to the Irish before his hit. Elena had inherited it, unpaid, and Colucci was twisting it into leverage. The experimental drugs, not just smuggling, but extortion, forcing insiders like her to facilitate routes through St. Mary's supply chains. Her transfer denial, the flagged consultations, it fit, a web of coercion she'd navigated alone to avoid dragging her workplace down. Victor laughed, low and ugly. Debt's interest compounds, girl. Refuse, and that trial you turned down? We make sure no hospital touches you. Or worse, your charts go public. Imagine the pity party. The door rattled as Mateo eased it open an inch, the hinges groaning faintly. Inside, the warehouse air was stale, laced with oil and the chemical bite of pharmaceuticals. Crates pried open, revealed vials glinting under a bare bulb, labels scrubbed but recognizable. Off-market oncology agents, the kind that promised miracles for a syndicate's price. Elena stood her ground, chin lifted, but her pallor screamed fatigue, the illness etching lines Mateo hadn't noticed in the exam room. You touch my work, and Tommy's ghost haunts you worse than any Rossi. A shuffle from the shadows, Luca signaling a guard circling the far end. Tension coiled as Victor stepped closer, his hand twitching toward a bulge at his hip. Mateo's pulse thrummed. One wrong move, and the powder keg ignited. He signaled Luca. Flank left, create diversion. As Luca tossed a pebble to clatter against a pallet, drawing the second guard's attention, Mateo slipped inside, Glock drawn, but low. Elena, he whispered, voice cutting the standoff like a knife. She whirled, eyes widening in shock, then narrowing to fury. Victor spun, hand diving for his weapon, but Luca was faster, bursting through with a tackle that sent them crashing into crates. Vials shattered, the acrid scent blooming sharp and choking. Elena bolted toward Mateo, but a beam from the scuffle caught her ankle. She stumbled, pain flashing across her face. What the hell are you doing here? She hissed, grabbing his arm for balance as they ducked behind a forklift. Saving your ass, apparently, he shot back, scanning for exits. The side door was clear, but sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had tripped a silent alarm, or a patrol caught the noise. Victor roared, grappling with Luca, fists thudding dully against flesh. Run! River access! My car's there! She hesitated, green eyes locking on his, a storm of trust and betrayal. The warehouse groaned as another fight erupted, shadows dancing wildly under the swinging bulb. Was this the debt repaid, or the spark that burned them all? As they dashed toward the water's edge, the river's chill rising to meet them, Mateo wondered if pulling her from the depths would drown him instead. The river's edge rushed up to meet them, a jagged line of concrete and rebar where the warehouse's shadow bled into the murky water. Elena's breath came in sharp bursts, her hand clamped around Mateo's wrist like a lifeline. The chill wind off the Chicago River whipping her hoodie against her sides. The air was thick with the tang of wet earth and diesel, the low gurgle of the current underscoring the chaos behind them. Shouts echoing from the warehouse, the crash of overturned crates, Luca's muffled grunts as he held the line. Sirens grew louder, slicing through the dawn mist like accusations, their wail bouncing off the silos and drawing closer from the direction of the industrial bridge. Keep moving, Mateo urged, his voice a low rasp over the gravel crunching under their boots. He scanned the bank, spotting the sedan's outline half hidden behind a rusted barge ramp, its doors unlocked as per Luca's protocol. Elena's limp slowed them, her ankle twisting with each step, but she didn't complain, just gritted her teeth, green eyes fierce in the pale light. The warehouse door banged open behind, Victor's silhouette bursting out with the second guard in tow, guns glinting as they fired wild shots into the fog. Bullets pinged off metal pilings, sparks flashing like fireflies in the half-dark. They dove into the sedan, Mateo slamming the gear shift into drive before the doors fully latched. The engine roared to life, tires spinning on slick mud as they fishtailed onto the access road. Elena braced against the dash, her face ashen, the chemical residue from the shattered vials clinging to her clothes like a bitter perfume. "You idiot!" she snapped, twisting to glance back. "That was my out. Colucci's debt settled. Now you've dragged me into your war." "My war?" Mateo shot a look in the rear view, the warehouse shrinking as they barreled toward the bridge. Victor's truck peeled out after them, headlights stabbing through the mist, but Luca's voice crackled over the radio. "Clearing now, boss. Gino's en route. Bridge blockade in 2. The pursuit was on, but contained. For now. You were trading tips for pills that kill more than they cure. Tommy's ledger? That's Colucci's noose, not closure. I owe you for the stitches, yeah, but this is me not letting ghosts bury the living." She rubbed her ankle, wincing as the sedan jolted over potholes, the river's briny spray flecking the windows. The interior smelled of leather and adrenaline, the heater kicking in with a warm whoosh that did little to thaw the tension between them. Elena's chart flashed in Mateo's mind, relapsed, refusing trials, now layered with this. Coerced into sabotage, her access at St. Mary's a pawn in Colucci's pharma racket. Experimental drugs smuggled as cures, but laced with cut corners, doled out to desperate marks who vanished when complications hit. Her uncle's old protection debt had morphed into this, a subtle ledger of favors twisted into threats. The bridge loomed, its iron trusses groaning under the weight of passing semis, the river churning 50 feet below in a froth of industrial runoff. Victor's truck gained, ramming their bumper with a jolt that sent Elena sliding across the seat. She cursed, fumbling for the glove box. Inside, a spare burner phone, its screen lighting her face as she punched in a code. "Calling it in," she said, voice tight. "Hospital security. Anonymous line. Tell them to lock down oncology supplies. Colucci's been siphoning through a nurse in admin. I have the shift logs." Mateo's grip whitened on the wheel. Trust flickered. Her move was bold, exposing the rot without naming names. But autonomy clashed with his instinct to shield. Pulling her deeper meant possession, a claim his code forbade on the vulnerable. "You don't have to fight solo. My network can bury this, reroute their manifests, flip their informants. But you? Walking away clean isn't an option anymore." "Clean?" She laughed, brittle as the bridge's rattling rails. The phone pressed to her ear amid static bursts. "You read my chart, Mateo. 6 months, maybe less. Colucci dangled that trial like bait. Play along, get the meds. I tipped them on your shipment to buy time, not loyalty. But you shatter everything by showing up." Her words hung, raw, the pull between them electric, his possessiveness a shadow to her fierce independence, loyalty tested by the secrets she'd guarded alone. Gino's blockade materialized at the bridge's far end. 2 vans angled to block lanes, unmarked but unmistakable, their drivers stepping out with hands visible but poised. Victor's truck swerved, brakes screeching as it fishtailed into a spin, slamming into a guardrail with a metallic crunch. No pursuit now. The river's bend swallowed them, sirens converging on the wreck. Mateo eased off the gas, merging onto the lakeshore drive where the city woke in fits of traffic and fog-shrouded joggers. The sedan hummed steadily, the danger ebbing, but the unease coiling tighter. Elena ended the call, the hospital confirming a lockdown. Subtle behavioral tells from the admin nurse, access codes logged at odd hours, tying back to Colucci's crates. "It's done," she said, sinking back, exhaustion etching her features. "But they'll come for me now. Charts don't lie, but grudges do." He pulled into a shadowed overlook near the Adler Planetarium, the lake's vast gray expanse stretching out, waves slapping pilings with a rhythmic thud. The air through the cracked window carried salt and distant freighter horns, a momentary sanctuary. Mateo turned to her, the space between them charged. Then stay with me. Safe house, doctors on payroll, no strings but protection. Your ethics, my code. We end this together. Her eyes met his, searching, the conflict raw, fear of surrender warring with the spark of found alliance. But as his phone buzzed, a text from Luca with a decrypted manifest fragment, showing Elena's name flagged in Colucci's ledger, not just as debtor, but as key to a larger heist on Rossi Holdings, doubt crept in. Was her involvement deeper, a betrayal masked as survival? Or had the river just forged something unbreakable, only for the current to pull it under? The Overlook's gravel crunched faintly under the sedan's tires as it idled, the engine's low rumble blending with the lake's relentless waves crashing against the breakwater. Dawn's light filtered through the fog, turning the water into a shimmering veil of silver and slate, while the Adler Planetarium's dome loomed nearby like a silent witness, its glass facade reflecting the city's awakening pulse. Mateo's phone screen glowed in his hand, the decrypted manifest fragment casting harsh shadows across his face. Elena's name circled in digital red, annotated as Asset, Hospital Access for Pharma Reroute. Leverage, Vasquez Debt, plus Medical Profile. Not just a debtor, a pivot in Colucci's play to hijack Rossi shipments, using her oncology knowledge to mask drug consignments as legitimate hospital deliveries. Doubt twisted in his gut, sharper than the stitch in his side. Was her tip-off a feint, drawing him into exposure? Elena leaned back against the seat, her green eyes still locked on his, the conflict etching deeper lines around them. The air in the car hung thick with salt spray, and the faint chemical residue clinging to her hoodie, a reminder of the warehouse's shattered crates. Protection, she echoed, her voice laced with skepticism, the Midwestern lilt fraying at the edges. From a Rossi? That's like trading one cage for a gilded one. I told you, my fight's mine. Colucci's got the leverage. They know my chart inside out, twisted it into this mess. But I'm no pawn. Mateo's jaw tightened, his fingers drumming the wheel, the leather creaking under his grip. Possessiveness surged, a dark undercurrent to his code, shield the vulnerable, but at what cost to her fire? Pawn or not, that ledger says you're the key. Not just debt. They want your access to reroute their crap through St. Mary's. Experimental trials? That's the hook. They dangle cures to insiders like you, then squeeze for intel on our docks. Tommy's ghost is their excuse, but this is bigger. A heist on my holdings, timed to your shifts. She shifted, wincing as her ankle protested, the movement sending a faint antiseptic whiff from her skin, echoes of the hospital's sterile grip. Bigger how? I fed them one tip on a Rossi manifest to buy breathing room for treatment I can't afford. Uninsured, remember. Colucci's admin contact at the hospital promised the trial drugs off books if I looked the other way on their siphoning, but I drew the line at sabotage. That's why the warehouse, pressuring me to plant a tracker on your next shipment. The revelation landed like a cold wave, the lake wind whistling through the cracked window, carrying distant buoy bells tolling like warnings. Mateo's network had flagged anomalies in hospital logistics weeks ago, discrete ledgers showing oncology supplies vanishing into ghost deliveries, but tying it to her? Human error, institutional blind spots, all exploited by Colucci's reach. No magic, just the grind of corruption, where a nurse's desperation became a syndicate's fulcrum. You played both sides to survive, he said, voice low, admiration warring with suspicion. Smart, but now they've got your number. Literally. That text pulling me to the warehouse? Bait, using you to flush me out. Elena's laugh was short, edged with fatigue, her fingers twisting the burner's cord. Flushed you right into it. Loyalty's a luxury I can't afford, Mateo. Ethics? Mine say heal, not harm. yours. Whatever code keeps you from gutting rivals on sight, it doesn't extend to dragging me under. Autonomy blazed in her gaze, pushing against his urge to claim, to fortify her world with his shadows. But trust teetered, her independence a blade that could cut them both. His phone buzzed again, Luca's encrypted ping. Tail confirmed, unmarked van, 2 blocks back on Lakeshore. Colucci plates, circling since the bridge. Safe house compromised? Mateo's pulse quickened, eyes flicking to the rear view where headlights ghosted through the mist, too deliberate to be traffic. We move, my place on the Gold Coast. Secondary perimeter, fresh guards. No debate. She hesitated, then nodded, the pull of survival overriding pride. The sedan surged forward, merging into the sparse morning flow, the planetarium shrinking in the side mirror. Tension coiled as they wove north, the lake's expanse giving way to high-rises piercing the fog like steel fingers. The pursuing van hung back, a shadow in the flow, its driver using civilian cars for cover. Classic surveillance, no overt aggression yet. Mateo radioed Luca. Flush protocol. Loop through the tunnel at Ohio Street. Document angles. Plates end in 22. The underground tunnel swallowed them, its tiled walls echoing with the sedan's hum, fluorescent strips flickering overhead like stuttering heartbeats. The air turned cool and damp, laced with exhaust and the faint drip of condensation from unseen leaks. Elena gripped the door handle, her breath shallow. If they hit us here, jammed exits, blackout. Won't. But words faltered as the light stuttered, plunging the tunnel into strobe chaos. Not a full blackout. Targeted. A power dip from a tripped substation or sabotage. Brakes squealed ahead, a multi-car pileup blooming from the shadows, taillights flaring red like blood in the dark. The van surged closer, ramming their rear with a jolt that whipped Elena forward, her seatbelt biting into her shoulder. Horns blared, the tunnel a cacophony of panic, concrete walls amplifying every scrape and curse. Mateo swerved into the emergency lane, gravel spitting as he floored it past the snarl, the van mirroring but clipping a stalled sedan, metal grinding, sparks flying in the dim emergency strips. "Hold on," he growled, emerging topside into blinding sunlight, the Gold Coast's luxury facades a stark contrast to the chaos below. Guards at the safe house entrance, a discreet high-rise with keycard gates and rotating patrols, signaled clear, vans pulling up to block pursuit. The van peeled off into side streets, vanishing like smoke, but not before Luca's team snapped plates tracing to a Colucci front, a trucking firm with manifests matching the pharma crates. Inside the lobby, the air shifted to polished coolness, scented with fresh orchids and the subtle hum of security elevators. Mateo guided Elena to a private suite, its walls lined with soundproofed panels and windows overlooking the magnificent Miles bustle. A medic waited, discreet, on payroll, tending her ankle with ice and wraps, the room's soft lighting easing the strain from her face. But as Luca delivered a tablet with the full ledger decrypt, Mateo's world tilted. Elena's profile wasn't just leverage, it detailed a staged relapse tip to hospital admins, pressuring her denial of the transfer to keep her in ER, prime for Colucci's access. Partial truth emerged. She'd resisted deeper, but a burner call log showed outreach to Rossi informants, anonymous warnings about the heist. Ally or double agent? "You knew," Mateo said quietly as the medic left, the door clicking shut. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, bandaged foot elevated, her expression a mask cracking under scrutiny. The warnings, were they to me, or to buy time from both sides? Her silence stretched. The city's distant traffic, a low roar beyond the glass. Trust fractured, the code demanding answers, even as loyalty begged belief. But as shadows lengthened across the room, a new alert pinged. Colucci's next drop, tonight at the docks. Manifests rerouted through her old shift logs. Would she tip the scales toward salvation, or tip them into the abyss? If this tale already has you hooked, hit the like button. It helps us bring more hidden stories to light. The suite's ambient lighting softened the edges of the tension coiling in the air, but Mateo felt it like a taut wire ready to snap. The Gold Coast high-rise hummed faintly with the city's midday rhythm, distant car horns filtering through triple-paned glass, the faint scent of rain-dampened streets rising from the magnificent mile below. Elena sat perched on the edge of the king-sized bed, her bandaged ankle propped on a silk pillow, the medic's ice pack melting into a cold seep against the duvet. Her hoodie hung loose, the chemical tang from the warehouse still clinging faintly, mixing with the room's crisp linen aroma. Luca had retreated to the adjoining office, his tablet screens casting blue flickers through the half-open door, decrypting the latest manifest intercepts. Mateo paced the Persian rug, its fibers muffling his steps, the ledger file open on his phone. Elena's name woven into Colucci's web not as victim, but facilitator. Shift logs time-stamped to diverted pharma crates. Anonymous tips that had steered Rossi's shipments into ambushes. Yet the warnings to his informants, burner pings routed through proxies, suggested a double game. Loyalty fractured against suspicion, his code demanding truth even as her autonomy pulled like an undertow. "Those calls," he said, stopping to face her, his voice a controlled rumble. "To my network. About the heist. You say you're no pawn, but this ledger paints you as the queen on their board. Explain it, Elena, before I decide if protection means locking you down or cutting ties." She met his gaze, green eyes steady despite the pallor etching her skin, the relapse's toll hidden under layers of defiance. Her fingers traced the bed's edge, nails short and practical from endless shifts. Cutting ties. That's rich from a man who stormed a warehouse like it was his personal crusade. A pause. Her breath shallow as she shifted, the ice pack slipping with a wet thud. Tommy's debt started small. Protection money he owed Colucci's old crew after a bad deal in 15. When he died, it rolled to me, blood ties and all, uninsured, scraping by on nurse pay. They dangled the trial drugs. "Feed us intel on hospital routes. Get your meds." I gave scraps, manifest anomalies, nothing that hit your core ops. The tips to your side? Insurance. Keep the balance so neither crushes me. The words landed heavy, the room's air conditioner whispering cool drafts that raised goose flesh on her arms. Mateo's mind raced through the logistics. Colucci's trucking firm. Plates from the tunnel chase linking to warehouse drops. Access codes Elena's logs had indirectly flagged. Human error in hospital admins. Institutional limits on tracking diversions. All exploited in a credible grind of coercion. No grand conspiracy, just the slow bleed of desperation. But possessiveness clawed at him, the urge to shield her warring with the fear she'd chosen survival over alliance. Balance? That ambush at the Southside warehouse? Your tip led them right to me. Bullet in my side says it wasn't abstract. Her jaw tightened, a flicker of regret crossing her face before autonomy armored it again. I didn't specify the meat. Colucci twisted it, had their runner plant the graze as a warning. I pulled back after, warned your ghost network to reroute the next pharma intercept. Fear's a hell of a motivator, Mateo. Mine's not just the cancer, it's watching good people die from cut-rate cures they peddle to the desperate. She stood, testing her ankle with a wince, the carpet muffling her uneven steps toward the window. Outside, the lakefront gleamed under clearing skies, freighters cutting white wakes like scars on the water. Luca's voice cut from the office, sharp over the keyboard clacks. "Boss, dock alert. Colucci's drop tonight 10 p.m. at the Calumet Slip. Manifest shows oncology vials, but weights match arms shipments. Your holdings, our cranes, their crew, and her shift codes embedded in the routing. They need her sign-off to bypass security cams." Mateo's pulse spiked, the pieces locking. Elena's oncology access as the final key, a subtle behavioral tell in her charting patterns that Colucci had mirrored in their ledgers. Infiltration loomed. The docks a labyrinth of cranes and shipping containers under sodium lights, where rival factions clashed in shadowed exchanges. "They come for you here?" he asked, turning to her, the space between them electric with unresolved stakes. She shook her head, ponytail swaying. "Not direct. Too messy. But if I don't show for the handoff, they expose everything. My chart goes viral in their circles. Hospital fires me on fabricated ethics breaches. Prudence says I ghost, but ambition. Yours or theirs. It pulls harder." Conflict hung raw. Her independence a flame he wanted to cup, not extinguish. Trust versus suspicion, the code's vow to protect innocence bending under the weight of her choices. A low buzz from the suite's intercom shattered the moment. Security feed alert. Luca burst in, tablet in hand. "Perimeter breach attempt. Delivery drone, disguised as maintenance, jammed our signal for 10 seconds. Dropped a burner at the service entrance. Message inside. Vasquez signs or Rossi docks burn at midnight. Coordinates for the slip, with her biometrics required for gate access." Elena's face drained, the room suddenly too small, the distant lake horns moaning like omens. Surveillance tightened its noose, distant watchers in high-rises across the street, their lenses catching glints in the sun. Matteo's hand brushed hers, a possessive anchor she didn't pull from. "We go together. Infiltrate the drop, flip their play. Your ethics, my logistics. No more solo." She searched his eyes, loyalty flickering against fear, the pull undeniable. But as Luca pulled up thermal scans of the docks, guard rotation staggered, access codes cycling every hour, the environment turned hazardous. Forecasted storm rolling in. Blackouts from lightning strikes a natural ally to any sabotage. Would her sign-off be the salvation that sealed their bond, or the betrayal that sank the Rossi Empire into the river's depths? The storm clouds boiled over Lake Michigan as the armored SUV cut through the evening traffic, its wipers slashing rhythmically against sheets of rain that hammered the windshield like impatient fists. The Gold Coast's glittering facades blurred into streaks of light, giving way to the industrial sprawl south of the Loop, where the Chicago River widened into the Calumet Slip, a maze of towering cranes and stacked containers that swayed like metallic giants in the wind. Matteo gripped the wheel, the leather slick under his palms, while Elena sat beside him, her bandaged ankle braced against the floor mat, the faint scent of antiseptic from the medic's wrap mingling with the cab's leather and the ozone tang of impending thunder. Luca rode shotgun, his tablet's glow illuminating his tense profile as he cross-checked guard rotations against the encrypted feed. Colucci's crew arriving in waves, disguised as longshoremen. Their access codes synced to Elena's old oncology logs, subtle digital echoes of her coerced tips. "This is madness," Elena murmured, her voice cutting through the engine's growl, green eyes fixed on the horizon where lightning forked silently over the water. Rain lashed the riverbanks, turning the access roads into rivers of mud that splashed against the undercarriage. "You infiltrate their drop, they hit back harder. My sign-off gets you in, but if they trace it—" "Traced already," Matteo replied, his tone steady but edged with the possessiveness that had shadowed him since the hospital. The code burned in him. Protect without possessing, but her fire tested it, pulling him between shielding her autonomy and forging a shared front. Luca's jammed their secondary signals, burner relays in the containers. We pose as dock crew, plant the tracker on their lead truck. Your biometrics open the gate. We reroute the manifest to our handlers. No shots, no spectacle. Storms our cover. Blackouts from surges, jammed exits natural as the tide. She nodded, fingers twisting the hem of her hoodie, the conflict raw. Loyalty to her ethics clashing with the fear of exposure. Her independence a fragile armor against the syndicate's grind. The SUV slowed at the perimeter, chain-link gates rattling in the gale, sodium lights flickering as thunder rumbled closer. Elena leaned out into the downpour, her palm pressing a biometric pad, her thumbprint, lifted from hospital scans and mirrored in Colucci's ledger, clicking the lock with a hydraulic hiss. They rolled through, the river's churn audible now, waves slapping pilings with wet smacks that echoed like distant gunfire. Inside the slip, the air thickened with diesel fumes and the briny rot of soaked wood, containers looming like tombstones under the storm's assault. Colucci's team moved in shadows, 6 figures in oilskins, unloading crates from a low-slung barge that bobbed against the dock, its hull groaning with the weight of concealed arms masked as pharma vials. Matteo parked in a blind spot behind a crane, the massive arm creaking overhead as wind gusted. "Flank left," he whispered to Luca, who slipped out with a nod, his silhouette vanishing into the rain-slicked gloom. Elena stayed close, her limp masked by the urgency, heart pounding against the chill seeping through her clothes. They crept along the dock's edge, puddles splashing underfoot, the generator's hum stuttering as lightning cracked, plunging the area into momentary black. In that stutter, Matteo spotted Victor, scarred lip curled in a sneer, coordinating from a lit office trailer, tablet in hand reviewing the manifest. Elena's code had bought them entry, but behavioral tells betrayed the setup. Guards rotating too predictably, a burner phone glinting in Victor's pocket, synced to hospital cams that could flag her absence. "There," she breathed, pointing to the lead truck idling near the water, its taillights bleeding red into the rain. "Tracker under the chassis. Your logistics, my distraction." As she approached the truck's cab, feigning a manifest check, Matteo knelt in the mud, the cold seeping through his jeans, fingers working the magnetic device into place. Thunder boomed, masking the click, but a guard rounded the corner, rain dripping from his hood, eyes narrowing at Elena's form. "Vasquez? You're late. Sign here." He thrust a clipboard, but his free hand hovered near his belt, suspicion flickering like the erratic lights. She took it, pen scratching a false approval, her voice steady over the gale. Storm delayed the barge, reroute confirmed. But the guard's radio crackled, Victor's voice barking, "Hold! Rossi sent on the feed!" Panic surged. A camera angle, overlooked in the downpour, had caught their SUV's plates. The guard lunged, grabbing her arm, but Elena twisted free, elbow connecting with his jaw in a dull thud that sent him staggering into the river's edge. Waves surged, pulling at his boots as he splashed, cursing. Matteo rose, Glock drawn low, but the blackout hit full. Lightning strike tripping the grid, the slip plunging into inky chaos broken only by flashlight beams sweeping wildly. Shouts erupted, Colucci's crew converging, the environment turning lethal, containers shifting in the wind, a loose chain whipping like a lash, exits jammed by toppled pallets from the gale. Victor burst from the trailer, firing blindly into the dark, bullets ricocheting off metal with sharp pings. Luca's diversion, a tossed flare from the shadows, drew 2 away, but Victor zeroed on Elena, tackling her to the wet concrete. She fought, nails raking his face, but he pinned her, snarling, "Dead ends tonight. Your chart's our ticket to Rossi's throat." Matteo charged, the rain blinding him, slamming into Victor with a shoulder that cracked ribs. Non-lethal, per the code, but enough to roll him off. A stray elbow caught Matteo's stitched side, tearing the wound open, blood warm and slick mixing with the downpour. Pain lanced, but he hauled Elena up, her hand finding his in the dark. "Go, truck's tracked. Luca's calling extraction." They bolted for the SUV, the dock a frenzy of shadows and storm. Guards slipping on the slick planks as sirens wailed from the bridge. Police drawn by the blackout reports. Institutional limits turning the tide without a shot fired. The engine roared, tires hydroplaning as they fishtailed onto the access road, Victor's furious roar fading behind. Luca piled in at the gate, breathless, confirming the tracker live. Manifests rerouted, Colucci's Pharma Arms hybrid exposed to feds via anonymous tips. But the cost etched deep. Matteo's side throbbed, a shallow gash demanding stitches, exposure rippling through networks as the ledger's full truth surfaced. Elena's warnings had sabotaged deeper heists, her ethics steering her to balance without full betrayal. No easy win. Colucci fragmented but vengeful. Her hospital role tainted, forcing a quiet resignation. Back at the penthouse, as dawn broke clear over the lake, Elena stitched his wound in the suite's bathroom, her hands steady under the warm light, the air scented with iodine and relief. "You didn't have to," she said softly, tying off the thread, their eyes meeting in the mirror. Trust forged in the storm. Possessiveness yielding to mutual autonomy. "Code says otherwise," he replied, pulling her close, the embrace a pledge without chains. "Protection, not possession. Your fight's ours now. Trials, ledgers, all of it." Weeks blurred into a new rhythm. Her experimental treatment funded through shadowed channels. No strings but shared vigilance. His empire leaner, the Rossi Code refined by her ethics. The docks ran cleaner, Colucci's remnants scattered by federal raids on credible manifests and burner traces. Victory's scar, Matteo's limp from the tear, her chart a private vow rather than leverage. But the true treasure gleamed in quiet moments, the river's hum from the balcony, loyalty outlasting power, a found family born from shattered secrets. In the end, the adventure etched deeper than any spoils. Memories of rain-slicked docks and defiant glances, transformation from ghosts to guardians. Legacy wasn't thrones or threats, but the code they built together. Vows kept, bonds unbreakable against the current. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of loyalty, danger, and found family. See you in the next story.